Picture this, a young and untested Spider-Man faced with a gripping dilemma. Can you imagine the weight of a life taken at such an early stage? In this video, we see Spider-Man taking a treacherous path, getting his hands dirty, and leaving scars that will last a lifetime. Stay till the end to discover the devastating impact of these actions on his life. Apparently, there's supposed to be a Spider-Man title where Peter Parker ends up committing manslaughter. However, the story doesn't start with Spider-Man, but with Wolverine, and he is in the middle of a standoff in some isolated East German camp. He has a red-haired character named Charlemagne with him, or Charlie for short. It's the middle of the Cold War between the CIA and the KGB, and Charlie is embedded deep in the KGB as a double agent. She had reached out to Wolverine because her cover had been blown, so now Wolverine has to extract her. But before they can escape, a big group of KGB loyalists try to stop them, and Wolverine rips through them like minced meat. By the time he is done, Charlie is gone, leaving behind only a pendant. A decade or so later, Spider-Man is swinging his way through the city of New York. As usual, he is looking for some action he can photograph and make a quick buck out of. He also feels guilty that he is using his powers to cash in. As he swings and hopes for a good night, he hears a scream from a young girl running down the street. There's also a well-dressed, red-haired woman that sticks out from the rest of the seedy crowd. Spider-Man proceeds to check the screaming girl's story out. He gets to Sophie and Bert's shop, and they both have been shot point blank, in between the eyes. Despite his guilt, Peter takes pictures, and the next thing he does is hand them over to his editor. Peter now remembers that he has a dinner date at Aunt May's place and has to catch a train there. As usual, he is late, and Mary Jane is the one who answers the door. From the looks of it, they go on to have a jolly time, but the hosts seem like a couple who need to sort themselves out. At the end of the evening, Aunt May sees Peter and MJ off, and both are soon well on their way back to the city. They get to Times Square, and suddenly Peter's spider senses kick in. He figures there's a sniper on the roof, and he desperately needs to change into his Spidey suit. He excuses himself from MJ without explaining why. Soon, the police and the SWAT team arrive as well. Afterwards, Peter gets to MJ's place and tries to make amends. He ends up kissing her, and things get really weird between them. This is when he decides to skip town and leave it all behind, and that includes his Spider-Man hero persona. Down at his office, Jonah Jameson is being briefed on the latest killings to rock New York. His informant thinks the murders of Sophie and Bert and the roof sniper are connected. He thinks Agent Charlemagne has resurfaced and is cleaning up former KGB agents. Jonah agrees to run the story just as Ned, the informant, asks for a reliable photographer. So Jonah gets on the phone and offers Peter the job. On his part, Wolverine gets to hear about Charlemagne in the news after all these years. He leaves the X-Mansion to seek her out. He goes all the way to Berlin, thinking he'll find her there. But Wolverine gets jumped by a few KGB agents who suspect he knows where Charlemagne is. When they figure he's just as clueless as them, they let him be. Wolverine even catches Charlemagne's scent right there, but she disappears into the night yet again. The next day, Wolverine is in Berlin's equivalent of Times Square, and while there, he catches the scent of none other than Peter Parker, who is there with Ned, the investigative journalist from earlier. Peter tries to complain to Ned that he shouldn't have come on this trip. Wolverine, on his part, takes note. That evening, as Peter finishes up his long-distance call to Aunt May, Wolverine appears and tries to convince Peter to go back home. He asks Peter to follow him as they swing into the night. By the time Peter gets back to the hotel, he finds that Ned has been murdered and that his killers are still in the room. They are about to fire on Peter when Wolverine crashes in and takes them all out. Before these KGB agents can regroup, Wolverine and Peter must run away. This time around, Peter listens and gets as far as the bus station on his way to the airport. But right then, he has a moment of reflection and decides to face this danger head on. So he finds a shop that's still open so he can purchase any outfit that looks close enough to his Spidey suit, and voila, he hits a jackpot. Fortunately, Spider-Man has put a tracker on Wolverine, and he tries to follow it as he swings through the city. But then the tracker leads him to the wall separating East and West Germany. Wolverine has crossed over to the eastern side in his quest to find Charlemagne, so Peter dares to do the same. But the wall police are everywhere. Spider-Man is able to outwit these villains and barely avoids getting shot. He traces the tracker to a hotel, but Wolverine has lost him. Wolverine himself has tracked down Charlemagne to an old factory just in time to see her in action. There are multiple dead bodies in her wake. Now he has her cornered and plants a kiss for old time's sake. She is happy to see him too. They head over to her house in the East German countryside, and it's a big house. It seems Charlemagne has been busy amassing a fortune by spying privately for hire. She's been doing this for the longest time, and now she's gotten tired and wary. After a few months of bunking with Wolverine, she suggests they go out on the town. It's an expensive restaurant, and Wolverine senses that the place is packed with assassins. Just then, Spider-Man bursts in, not fully realizing the extent of the situation. All the goons in the room start shooting at Wolverine and Charlemagne as Spider-Man jumps to safety and attaches himself to the ceiling. Amid the commotion, he looks over at Wolverine and Charlemagne. They seem to love the way things are going. Apparently, Charlemagne already knew that having dinner that evening at this specific restaurant would result in a shootout. She even pulls out a gun from nowhere and shoots a few rounds. Meanwhile, Wolverine is busy slicing and dicing his way through the shooters. Spider-Man soon joins him. By then, Charlemagne had found a way to get out of there. Wolverine and Spider-Man both trace her down to a house in a seemingly quiet suburb. First, they check out the house and figure there are quite a number of armed men behind its doors. But then they decide to engage and swoop in. Wolverine is having a field day taking out the bad guys regardless of their guns. However, Spider-Man is a bit reluctant to take a life, even if it's the life of a bad guy. Once they're done with the lobby, Wolverine figures Charlemagne is being held down in the basement, so they check it out. It turns out there are dead bodies down there, and Charlie is responsible for them. And so begins a wild goose chase to stop Charlie's rampage, except Wolverine discovers dead body after dead body from one KGB safe house to another, and it seems Charlemagne is always 5 steps ahead of Wolverine and Spider-Man. That night, Wolverine gets called up for a meet at the Berlin Cemetery. It's supposed to be Charlemagne's last gesture after successfully completing her long list of targets. As they hug it out, she wants Wolverine to drive his claws into her and spare her the ordeal of being caught by the KGB. He almost does it, but then Spider-Man shows up and tries to stop him. They engage in a fight, and while they are distracted by an agency helicopter overhead, Charlie tricks Spider-Man and he takes a powerful swing at her, thinking she's Wolverine. She dies instantly from the nasty punch, and so her wish has been granted. Afterwards, Wolverine is able to secure fake passports for both of them, and they easily get back to West Germany through customs. Peter gets on a flight right away, while Wolverine stays back to take care of some business. Peter can't seem to get the image of Charlemagne's death out of his head, and the guilty feeling remains until he gets home. Jonah Jameson calls Peter to acknowledge the photos and ask about Ned, but then Mary Jane comes over, and they hug it out, and Peter feels a little relieved for the time being. So what started as a routine night for Spider-Man spirals into a spy thriller. Then it ends with him accidentally neutralizing Charlemagne, the main spy, who just so happens to be Wolverine's love interest. How do you think he feels? Whatever the case, Spider-Man feels worse.